which is presuppositional apologetics. Because what's the claim of presuppositional apologetics? Fundamentally, it's a revelational epistemology. So to follow the line here, it goes from sola scriptura, the principles that are there within sola scriptura that are just biblical principles in terms of God's revelation. That moves into apologetics and the philosophical claims about how do I know what I know? So how should I argue? Well, it's the voice of God. God's revelation is supreme. And that leads inevitably to the question of if you're dealing with issues of morality, if you're dealing with issues of justice and injustice, how shall I know? By what standard? And of course, I began to discover that in Bahnsen and of course in much of the Reformed tradition. But that's really what led me into a theonomic perspective of how do you know something is just or unjust? By what standard?
Non-rockabotus must stop. I don't want to rock the boat. I want to sink it.
Are you going to bark all day, little doggy, or are you going to bite?
Brett,
delusional. I love you, Jeff.
Delusional, yeah. Delusional is okay in your worldview. I'm an animal. You don't chastise chickens for being delusional. You don't chastise pigs for being delusional. So you calling me delusional using your worldview is perfectly okay. It doesn't really hurt. She hung up on me.
What?
Desperate times call for faithful men and not for careful men. The careful men come later and write the biographies of the faithful men, lauding them for their courage.
Go into all the world and make disciples. Not go into the world and make buddies. Not to make brosives.
Right.
Don't go into the world and make homies.
Right.
Disciples.
I got a bit of a jiggle neck. That's a joke, Pastor.
When we have the real message of truth, we cannot let somebody say they're speaking truth when they're not.
Take an amazing journey to a place that will blow your mind and move your heart so you will never be the same again.
For I want you to know how great a struggle I have for you and for those at Laodicea, and for all who have not seen me face to face, that their hearts may be encouraged, being knit together in love, to reach all the riches of full assurance of understanding and the knowledge of God's mystery, which is Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Apologia Radio. Get us more at apologiastudios.com. I sound like an old smoker right now. I don't know. My voice is gone.
Like Dave Chappelle?
Allergies in the air. I didn't sleep a lot last night. This time of year for me, it's every single time. It's like when the weather changes in Arizona, I go through about 2 weeks of brutal allergy stuff. But you can hear it in my voice. I'm here with Luke the Bear.
What up?
I'm Jeff, the Callman and Ninja. Go to apologiastudios.com, APOLOGIA. apologiastudios.com to get more. You can get podcasts, you can get radio programs, you can get Apologia Radio, hundreds of episodes. You can get Provoked, you can get Cultish, you can get Sheologians. You can also sign up for All Access. When you do, you make everything we do possible, including what we dropped last night. If you saw the showdown in Salt Lake City, woohoo! Outside of the abortion facility, intense. It'll raise your heart rate. If you didn't see it yet, make sure you're sitting down and maybe have some CBD or something to keep your nerves down when you're watching that one. But anyways, if you see content through Apologia Studios, whatever it is, whether it's teaching, whether it's a podcast, whether it's on the street evangelism, engagement, anything you see, it's all made possible because people just like you partner with us through All Access to make all of our ministry possible. And when you do, you get the TV show, you get the after show, you get Apologia Academy, and you also get the new thing we're doing right now. It's Ask Me Anything. We're doing it every month right now, where you can actually go to the website live, talk with us, interact with us, ask questions, and that's all happening just for our All Access partners. So thank you for all of you guys who are a part of that.
Have you had any crazy questions yet?
It's been fun. Have you gotten a chance to see it yet?
I haven't.
It's fun. It's actually really, it's been a good time. Isaac is a great host, and he's very proud of himself.
Yeah.
He likes how his hands look in the videos.
He did say that.
He said my hands look great in the videos.
I can verify that.
So he does a great job. So that's all happening on Apologia All Access. Go to apologiastudios.com to get that and partner with us in all of our ministry that we're doing. Wanted to show you right now, if you haven't signed up yet, we have a special guest today, Dr. Greg Bahnsen's son, David Bahnsen. I'm going to introduce him in just a moment here. But speaking of Dr. Bahnsen, we have Bahnsen U. Thank you to the Bahnsen family for entrusting us with that. It is constantly expanding and growing now. We have hundreds and hundreds of lectures, seminary lectures, sermons, all remastered right now, and they're all going up at apologiastudios.com. It's at Bahnsen U at apologiastudios.com, and it is completely and absolutely totally for free. It shouldn't be in terms of what you're getting. It's one of the most rigorous and best Christian educations and seminary level educations you can get, better than most seminaries in the nation today, that you would go into debt for. And thank you to the Bahnsen family. That has been entrusted to us so we can deliver it to the world and give it to you. It will change your life. It will change the world. That's why we're doing it and investing so much in it. It is Bahnsen U at apologiastudios.com. Get it right now. It is completely and totally for free.
Not Bronson U.
Not Bronson, yes. No.
We've had some people confuse and think it's
Bahnsen,
Charles Bronson.
B-A-H. Bahnsen. Bahnsen U, it's all there. It's all free. You just need to go sign up for a free account. And yes, it's really for free. And more is coming all the time. We wanted to make sure that we treated these with the value that they really have. And so we're investing a lot in remastering them, making the website done in such a way where it's easy to access and it's understandable and it's beautiful. We're adding all kinds of neat things to it that's on the way in terms of when you listen to a lecture that I listened to in seminary, you're also going to be getting, along with that lecture, even though it's hard to hear in seminary, it's remastered, you're going to be getting even text, so you can even print off down the road like what was in the lecture. And so we're just doing a lot to make it just extra special for you, for Bible study groups, for churches. This is a clip from Bahnsen U. It's just a minute long right here. This is Bahnsen talking about one of the premier things about presuppositional apologetics, just something that's part and parcel to the Christian worldview, the myth of neutrality. Here is Dr. Bahnsen telling us about what's wrong with neutrality.
Here's what's wrong with neutrality. It takes away your Christian distinctiveness. Jesus said, be sanctified by the word of truth. Secondly, it robs you of knowledge. Paul says, if you follow worldly tradition and human authority, the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are going to be forfeited. Thirdly, it's immoral. Paul says, stop thinking like the Gentiles do with their futility and hardened hearts. Fourthly, it's impossible anyway. Jesus said, you can't serve two masters. He who's not with me is against me. So as we approach apologetics, we are no longer going to be accepting a neutral methodology, and I'm going to assume Christianity is true while I'm studying how to defend the truth of Christianity.
Yes. That gets back to what I actually quoted from there in the beginning, and that was Colossians chapter 2. In Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. If you want to know something, truly know it. It's found in Christ, and there is ultimately no neutrality. And that brings us to the start of our discussion today. We are bringing in Dr. Bahnsen's son. He's a good friend of ours and someone I admire greatly. He is the founder of the Bahnsen Group, wouldn't you know it, and founding managing partner and chief investment officer of the Bahnsen Group, a bi-coastal private wealth management firm with offices in Newport Beach, California, and New York City, managing over $3 billion in client assets. David is consistently named as one of the top financial advisors in America by Barron's, Forbes, and the Financial Times. And you all probably see him regularly on the news and Fox News and stuff, talking about financial stuff, very important. And one of our good friends, welcome David Bahnsen.
Well, thank you for the very kind introduction. And I assure you that no one would ever confuse me for the real one and only Dr. Bahnsen.
That's right.
Who earned his doctor title the old-fashioned way. He actually got a research degree and went to a research university and wrote a dissertation. So if it sounds like I'm dissing Dr. Jill Biden, It's because I am.
That's right. Good. So I wanted to bring you on. I know your time is valuable, David, but I wanted to bring you on because I think it's important for us to have, in the midst of the conversations happening right now about inflation, the shipping supply chain crisis, and all that's happening with people. What is it? 4.5 million people left the workforce last month, I think was the numbers. And all that's going on, I wanted to have a conversation about the economy, and I wanted to ask for your expertise. So let me start the conversation, David, by just asking the question of the basics. Are we in trouble right now? Real trouble? What do you think?
Well, it depends. It depends what people mean by that. Is there a systemic issue that is going to be secular or structural in the economy? I do not believe so, but I think in trouble meaning goods and services being late and getting delivered, and upward pricing pressure because of the supply chain disruptions for people who are trying to find work to satisfy the needs of their business. Even if it goes away in 6 months, that's still a lot of trouble for them in the next 6-month period or 3-month period or whatever it may be. So the answer is sort of a yes and no. I do not believe that what we are facing is secular monetary inflation. And the reason for that is not good news. I'm not saying everything is fine. I'm just simply saying what you're looking at as a hurricane is actually an earthquake, which is the disinflationary pressures of losing economic growth because of excessive government spending. And so that's what I believe is the primary multi-year, multi-decade economic concern we have. But in the here and now, there is absolutely inflationary pricing pressures. And a lot of this is more cultural than economic. You do not have people leaving the workforce. You do not have unfilled jobs. We have a record level of job openings. The reason we have those things is because of people choosing to leave the workforce, choosing to be dormant, choosing to be unproductive in society, and because people lack the skills necessary to meet the job needs. So we have a tremendous mismatch culturally, socially, and economically of where the job market is in this country. And that's not a good thing. I don't like where the unemployment pressures lie. By the way, I know your guys' ages, you know mine. It's not our generation. 25 to 54 is pretty much fine. It's very low unemployment. It's people over the age of 55 choosing to leave the workforce, and it's people under the age of 25 unable to find entry-level work, largely because of high minimum wage prices. I like young people working, the character development, the entry into the economy, the job skill, human interaction development that represents. And I like older people bringing their wisdom, experience into the job market, and people choosing to leave or give up or not be retrained or get left behind, give into some of the desperation, cut themselves out of a couple decades of productivity in the senior years of their life. These are really big problems. So forgive me for the long answer, but
that's why we have you on, brother, to hear that. So I think what typically you see today in a world where people don't necessarily want to appeal to scripture, to transcendent law, issues of character, rebuilding in those areas, people will tend to, on news programs where they even invite you, they want a description, like what's happening. Here's a description. But I think we need an explanation, like in terms of, all right, so David, if I was to say to you right now, okay, obviously there's a lot broken, but how do we rebuild that? Because I'm going to go beyond the descriptions. This is what's happening to an explanation. Well, this is why it's happening, and this is how we're actually going to pull ourselves out of this. What do you think when you hear that? We go beyond the description, this is what's wrong, to an explanation of how we got here, some of the main things that are broken, and how we actually can move forward in a way that's glorifying to God and blesses our neighbors.
Well, let me, if you don't mind, start with how we got here and then end up to what the path forward may be, because I think that how we got here and one's view of how we got here informs what one has to think about the solutions going forward, particularly if they're to be God-glorifying solutions. And so it sounds like you're allowing me to actually answer what I believe ought to happen as opposed to what I believe will happen. And those are sometimes very different things.
Right.
But how we got to this position on the debt level, economically, and then on the labor market standpoint, culturally, are two different dynamics that are incredibly identifiable. They're both more or less a byproduct of the godforsaken decade of the 1960s and the sexual revolution and the humanism and secularization of American society that had been building for a number of decades throughout the 20th century. But I don't want to be overly simplistic, but I think as a general rule, we have largely adopted a view of American life that allows for a larger place of the federal government than we were intended to have in our nation's founding, and one that we mostly had throughout most of the republic. But when people say like, oh no, you had a very big federal government even in the 80s, you can't blame all this on the last couple of years. Well, that's most certainly true. But debt to GDP, the total amount of debt divided by the actual size of our economy, federal debt divided by GDP, gross domestic product, was about 30%. It's now about 130%.
Yikes.
In Japan, it's 250%. In most Western European countries, it's 170, 180%. And we're rapidly getting up there. But the problem is that we were at 65, 70% like yesterday, 2009, coming out of the financial crisis. So the most rapid acceleration of the percentage of debt has been just in the last 13 years. So if a family goes out and puts $100,000 on the credit card, but then stops, all of a sudden they're kind of running even and they're treading water. They're not getting ahead, but they're at least not adding more to the debt. That's not a good situation for that family, but it's better than if they're continuing to build up the credit card balance. That's what the deficit is. That's why the deficit is different than the national debt. And we're running right now the highest deficits in history.
Right.
We'll run $3 trillion last year, $2 trillion this year. And you can say, okay, well, the $3 trillion in the COVID moment, the economy dipped significantly. They shut down the country. Regardless of the unforced policy errors that caused that, there was at least a connection between them spending all this money and what they thought was a solution to economic difficulty. I don't happen to believe in that either, but let's put that aside. But right now you're having big economic recovery. Unemployment's back down in the 3-4% range. If anything, you have too many jobs you can't find workers for. GDP growth on the year will come in somewhere around 6% net of inflation. Now, it's not going to be there next year because a lot of that's just the recovery coming back out of COVID. But my point is, we don't care anymore whether the economy is good or bad, whether we're in war or peace. Now we've just said 2 trillion here, 1 trillion there, 900 billion there, 1.5 trillion there. And so this is largely a byproduct of the American culture accepting a much lower role for the citizen, a much lower priority on self-government, on subsidiarity, on families, communities, on local government, on the church, and then a much higher role for Washington, D.C. Okay, so just mathematically, that's how we got here. We have $29 trillion of debt now. Wow. And the vast majority of people say, I think the military is too big. Well, I don't think it is. But people can disagree on that. The last thing I'm concerned about what our government spends money on is national defense, but it's just peanuts in the grand scheme of things. And by the way, even the interest on the debt is not that much because interest rates are so artificially low that even that expense they've controlled. It's roughly 60%. 60 cents of every dollar is a transfer payment. The cost of healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Those are the major transfer payment mechanisms, and that accounts for the vast majority, over $2 trillion a year of federal outlays. So that's the state of affairs economically. How do we get to a point where people want to play video games till they're 34 years old on their mom's couch? How do we get to a point where 58-year-old men give up all hope and start turning to painkillers and alcohol? How do we get to a point where the labor participation force is the lowest in a generation? How do we get to a point where we have 7 times more disability claims than we did 10 years ago?
Wow.
All of those things are cultural. All of those things are spiritual. None of those things are economic. Now they become economic, guys, because there's a negative feedback loop. So bad cultural conditions lead to bad economic ones, which create worse culture, which creates worse economy. But no, those things, as I wrote in a book that you guys talked to me about on your show a couple of years ago, Crisis of Responsibility, these things have cultural and spiritual roots, and they're going to have cultural and spiritual solutions.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you guys didn't catch that, the book is Crisis of Responsibility, Our Cultural Addiction to Blame and How You Can Cure It by David Bahnsen. Pick it up. It's a great book, and it's not overwhelming. It'll really bless you. And well, I'll ask one fun question. Do you want to have something, Luke? You got something on standby? Because I have 2 quick things.
I know he only has a few minutes. So
okay, yeah. So the first, this is more of a personal question. New York City is one of my favorite places on the entire planet. I've been all over the world, and New York City is truly one of my very favorite. I think the city is just magical in so many ways, and it's one of my favorites. And so I was so discouraged over the last year to see these wonderful restaurants closing and all these spots closing because I think it's just one of the greatest places in the world. It's such an interesting city. And you're always there, back and forth. And so I just wanted to ask you on a personal level, what's New York City like right now? I mean, we were planning on going there maybe for Christmas or something like that, just because it is so magical at Christmas time. But we're like, well, I guess I can't go because I don't have the cookie card. And I don't know if anybody can even do anything in New York City right now. What's it like right now in New York City?
Yeah, you know what? This is something that kind of bothers a lot of my friends that don't necessarily feel as strongly about New York City as you do. And there is a sort of social divide that goes back to the days of Madison, Jefferson, Hamilton. You know, a lot of people don't like cities, and a lot of city people don't like the countryside and don't like suburbs or whatever. All that stuff aside, just objectively, we have cities in this country that are an unmitigated disaster right now. And it's not dishonest. It's not Fox News propaganda. Portland, San Francisco are in a bad way. I'm here in New York City all the time. I have an 11-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter that are here with me all the time, that go to school here. They walk all over the city by themselves. They take the subway by themselves. Every restaurant's packed. The city is back. I'm a little frustrated in Midtown Manhattan, where my office is, where I'm sitting right now as we're recording, because there's still a fair amount of law firms and finance firms that haven't brought their people back to the office. But you are right. The Vax card thing, there's a lot of restaurants you won't be able to get into without showing the card. Personally, guys, I'm vaccinated. I don't care. I show the deal. I go in, I eat. There's plenty of restaurants that aren't enforcing it like you would expect. It's sort of bizarre that they're expecting these poor restaurants that they shut down for a year to now become judge, jury, cop, executioner.
Exactly.
But I mean, no, you know, this is a very, very, very heavily vaccinated city for a lot of reasons, culturally, sociologically. It was sort of ground zero of COVID when it first started. So this wasn't one of the places that they had a ton of people that were kind of not going there. But there are still some. I mean, because one of the reasons, which I think is actually the most legitimate one, there was a lot of natural immunity because there was so much COVID here, and a lot of people, including, I'm saying, like the actual public school teachers, they had about 40% of them that wouldn't get vaxxed because they said, we already had COVID. We have the antibodies, you know? And so anyways, I don't think people would feel that just kind of being out and about in the city. The quality of life is coming back. The city needs a lot of work. A very, very bad mayor is leaving, and there is a better mayor coming. He's not the guy I would have picked, but he's so exponentially better than the one leaving that sometimes politics has to be the art of the possible. But I love New York, as you said. I believe that we will know our Kuyperian and Calvinian endeavors in American society are working when New York is leading the way in Christianization. And if you have a fully secular New York City, I don't think you're going to have a very Christianized America, and vice versa. So I am blessed here because there's some great churches that we're a part of. There's some great conservative groups I'm a part of. And the difference here versus other places I've lived, guys, is they don't take it for granted. This is a place where people appreciate their faith, appreciate their belief system, because they are a minority. And so they have to be bold. They have to be intelligent. They have to, stick together. So it's something I've learned to really love about the city, being here with my family.
Well, that's good to hear, brother. Luke?
Well, I know you have a couple minutes left here, so you might not have time to answer this question, but I think the biggest thing on my mind right now is how the cookie mandates are going to affect the economy. We're seeing all these people losing their jobs. We're seeing ships just stuck out at sea. We got railroad possibly going on strike. We got the airline pilots going on strike. The military. So it seems like nationwide it's affecting like 30 to 35% of like everyone. And so like the biggest question I have right now is, how do you foresee this like immediately, affecting the economy? A lot of people are saying we should stock up on food and toilet paper and all that. Like, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that in the limited time you have left with us.
Yeah, if we need a couple extra minutes, I'm okay. Listen, if you're referring to specifically vaccine mandates and their effect on this, or just the larger, I think it's going to prove to be a very, very small impact when all said and done. But a lot of that is because I'm not really sure that they're going to go through with it.
Yeah,
I think it's entirely possible that it will end up amounting to be a press release that never ended up getting actual OSHA enforcement. And they can probably get away with that. How do you get away with that? Because the media won't call them out on it. But here, and also because the COVID numbers have dropped so much. You've had this happen a lot throughout the COVID moment, that all of a sudden politicians intensified some of their overreach right at the moment where they knew the overreach was least needed or least effective or least appropriate to the conditions. And the mortality numbers, hospitalization numbers, and even case numbers, which is an utterly worthless statistic, have dropped so much that I think that at this point, the risk reward and the cost benefits, even for them, are very unlikely to go through with it. But when you look at those different things, I'd love to paint with a broad brush, and maybe you want me to, I don't know, I don't want to read into it. But I think like when you listen to some of the cable news where you only get 2 minutes instead of us spending a half hour together, there's kind of narratives like CNN wants you to believe that the reason why there's COVID is that there's these kind of crazy right-wing conservatives who won't get vaccinated. And I think on the Fox side of things too, they want you to believe that anything going on might be related to some of these specific things that the right doesn't like, whether it's vax mandates or something else. But I'm just being truthful with you that it's more nuanced than that. The thing with the ships is different than the thing with the trucks, which is different than some of the other areas are having trouble getting skilled labor. Some of these things predate COVID. There's a real problem of unskilled labor. Of skilled labor. We don't have the laborers that have the conditions ready for some of the different positions that are necessary.
Yeah.
The minimum wage thing is cause and effect. The additional federal supplement is cause and effect. When they were paying people over a year after the pandemic for 6 additional months. This was something that President Trump had started and extended, and then Biden extended it again. Paying beyond state unemployment coffers on top of that additional federal monies. So then you think, okay, well, that ends finally. And then people are going to jump off the couch and go back to work. Look, the truck driver thing, I'm just going to tell you guys, because I know from talking to executives of these companies, the guys can't pass the drug test. Wow. That's the reason they can't get people back to work. These guys need 30 days because they've been smoking weed for 6 months. That's what's going on.
California.
Yeah, well, and a lot of other states too.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
It's just very, very sad. But will we end up getting to a point where with the military and with some other positions that are kind of following it in pop culture with the NBA and some hip hop artists talking about the vax mandates, could it become more systemic economically? I wouldn't rule anything out, but I don't suspect that. And the reason being is that these people, the politicians, they're acting in their self-interest too. And these guys have a funny way of pushing just as far as they possibly can and then figuring out where they can't push any further.
Yeah.
And I think they're entering that zone.
You're right, David. Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because I only recently learned this because I didn't see, because we've been so involved in trying to help the Navy SEALs and other people who are part of the military, FBI, DEA, other organizations,
Any federal thing,
ATF, Border Patrol. about 30% who are saying no, you're not going to make me take this. And I didn't get a chance to really pay attention to after the press conference that the president gave. There was no law made.
Right.
There was no
Right.
official mandate. It was a press conference, and we're going to play some of that when we let David go here a little bit from Biden's talk today, just in terms of him still waiting on the labor to actually produce, the restrictions and mandates for that for the 100 and above employees. But it's interesting, I mean, to see a press conference telling everybody do this, everyone's sort of falling in line, but now you have to sort of wait to see, like you said, David, wait to see, or is anybody actually going to go through with this? And I'm hopeful that the answer will be no, and that we won't see the ultimately devastating effects on the economy that would have, just losing a lot of those skilled people in those various work forces. So, David, you've been great. I love, and I like how you said it too. When you talk about the typical news shows, you only have about a 2-minute burst to say as much as you can, as quickly as you can, and then move on to the next news piece. I love having these long talks, and David, you've been a great blessing to us. Thank you for joining us today, brother.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I'll ask one favor of you, Jeff. I'd love to come back when my book comes out here in a couple weeks and talk about a distinctly Christian view of economics.
Absolutely.
I'm very excited.
David, let's do 2 hours on it. I'll do as much as you want. That'd be wonderful.
Love it.
We need it. All right, everyone. David Bahnsen, thank you so much, brother.
Thanks, brother.
Don't forget, guys, pick up his book, Crisis of Responsibility, Our Cultural Addiction to Blame and How You Can Cure It. It is right now available at Amazon, and it's great. Like I said, it's not overwhelming. You need to listen to David, not just because his dad is Greg Bahnsen, but because David is an expert in his field. And here's one of the things I really love and appreciate about David is that not only is David a solid brother, he knows God, he loves God, loves God's word. Obviously, his dad did a wonderful job of pouring into his life and speaking truth into his life. But David is seen as a leader, not just in a Christian realm, because he's so good at what he does.
I think Proverbs has something to say about that.
It certainly does. That's exactly right. And so I think that's one of the things that I really prize so much about David is that you'll see David weekly on the regular news stations as the resident expert on how should we view these things, what should we be doing, and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And he's a solid believer, and he's seen as an expert in his field. And I wish more Christians would dominate their particular fields in exactly that way, whether it's the arts, whether it's the sciences or economics or politics or whatever. We need people who are consistent believers, who are not just kind of good at what they do, but they're the best at what they do, and everybody wants to learn from them. And that's who David is. So make sure you guys get that book, Crisis of Responsibility.
I was going to say, speaking of Christian view of economics, he will be at ReformCon 22, speaking on economics under the theme of by the standard. So I'm pretty excited about that. ReformCon.org, you guys can go there and sign up for updates. We do have a location locked in now. We have the dates, and we're working on all the other details. So be looking for that, and hopefully we'll see you here in May of 22.
Yeah, girl. That's right. So yeah, it's taken some time. We want this conference, ReformCon 2022, to be an amazing conference that glorifies God, and it's just done really, really well. We want there to be fellowship. We want there to be fun. This isn't a church service. It's a Christian conference, so you're going to get good talks, expert talks on a variety of different subjects. Lots of time for fellowship and hanging out. We want it to be a blasty blast, and so that's what we've been building. And so we've been having conversations. We just had a long conversation yesterday about putting everything together. We have a great venue down. It's a good time of year. It's not blazing hot, but it's also not super cold. It's been a good time of year. Great venue, great speakers. It's ReformCon 2022. ReformCon.org. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Lots to talk about. Thank you guys, everybody who's watching live right now. Make sure you guys like and share this so that the world can see Christian engagement with these issues. You know, it's interesting because, David is, for me, David's always an encouragement because he's a good sort of stabilizing force when you listen to him, right?
Yeah, totally.
You're not going to get a lot of conspiracy theory and those sorts of things. You're just going to get sort of like, here are the facts. Let's make sure we take it all into consideration. And he doesn't fall off a cliff one way or the other, which is I think why he's so super successful in what he does and so respected. one of the things we have to contend with is the fact that there is a supply chain crisis. The president, President Biden went on, talked about it, acknowledged it. There's no denying it. And like what David says, there's a number of factors involved in something like that, whether it's with the trucks, whether it's with the railways, whether it's with the ships themselves and having workers and all those things. I think one of the elements that needs to be taken into consideration is what David said near the beginning, is that government is supposed to be fairly limited and small.
Yeah.
And we're not there now. So it's interesting. You'll have at least one aspect of this is the government puts so many particular regulations in place for a particular industry. They lock them down with a ton of regulations, and when it messes the industry up, because it's private industry, it should be run as private industry with fairly limited regulations in terms of we want to make sure that there's no victims involved when you have an industry. But when you have an industry that should be private and the government tries to own that industry, the government really ends up stinking at what they're doing. I mean, look at the Postal Service. When you put the government involved, they can't do it right. They modern vernacular, they suck at it. Government is not created by God to be in private industry like that and to run those things. That's for us to do. The private citizens do that, and when we build it better. Because there's competition. There's competition and there's value, and people try to outdo each other because they want everybody's business. They want everyone to come to them. So what they're going to do, they're going to build a better product. They're going to make sure it's more on time. They're going to make sure it satisfies the customer. Government doesn't care. Government's not in business to make the product better or to make it more satisfying or to get it there on time. They're not supposed to be in that. So I think one of the things you have to look at, and there's a million components like David said to this, the supply chain breakdown. You got to look at the fact that, if you lose a ton of your skilled workers because you're forcing an unconstitutional, unlawful cookie mandate on them, if you do that, it's going to impact the industry, like it or not. I mean, you can lie, like Tucker Carlson said this week, lie all you want. But if you look what happened with the airlines this week, you talk about Southwest. Look, these pilots and other workers, they have Twitters. They can tweet. They have Facebooks too. They have social media too. They can tell everybody, this is what's really going on. You can lie all you want as the CEO and say it was weather that strangely didn't affect the other airlines. You can lie all you want and say, no, it wasn't because everybody's doing a kind of a strike or anything else. But then you have the Southwest pilots like, yep, that's exactly what it was.
With literally draping "Don't Tread on Me" flags out of the windows of airplanes.
There's a million factors. So I think, one of the things that has to be addressed from a Christian perspective is the problem is the government, right? And David is so right. It's a crisis of responsibility. When you have a people whose moral character and spiritual character is so low, they're not able to self-govern. And so they're always going to automatically look for somebody to care for them or to govern them. And people who love Jesus, who can self-govern, that have a transcendent law that they're standing on, they tend to be people who want to self-govern more. They don't want the restrictions of government and all of the things that governments bring in terms of making an industry bad. So I think one of the things that has to be looked at is like, look, the government shouldn't be involved in the way that it is in all these industries in the first place. Get them out, and you've taken away one major aspect of the problem in terms of these industries being able to function. And a perfect example, Luke, did you see, and I was waiting for this to happen, I was like, you know what won't be allowed to happen in a society like ours is for there to be this pileup of ships off the coast, not able to get in with every company's stuff, and for people not to be able to put like the product on their shelves to make money. It can't happen in our country. It's not supposed to be able to happen like that. So I was waiting for the private industries to sort of see the problem and go, we can't get our stuff to sell to make money. And so I was waiting for the private industries to say, we'll solve that problem. And sure enough, this week you started seeing like articles about like different Walmart or whoever, like Costco, Target, whatever, these major corporations were like, all right, if you guys can't solve the problem, we'll solve the problem. Yeah. And as they start like hiring them out themselves and doing their own thing to make sure they can get products on the shelves, because in the end, they're in business to make money. Yeah. And they're not gonna wait and just go, I guess we're just gonna fold and all burn down to the ground. They're gonna figure out a solution. That's what private industry does. Government doesn't do that. Government goes, well, I guess we got a problem. We can't fix it. Well, do we really need to? Are we trying to satisfy our customers? It doesn't really matter. I mean, they're printing money. themselves anyway. So like if stuff runs out, can't we just print some more dollars? I mean, can't we just do that? Private industry will say, no, we'll fix the problem. We'll figure out a way. We'll buy more trucks. We'll create a new route. We'll do business with this company over here that will actually get us our stuff on time, or we'll go to a different port. We'll work out that direction, and we'll figure it out, because it's not the government's job to manage those things. Yeah. And when they do, they suck. And perfect example, and I'm going to shut up here and pass it over to you, was that I don't know why it impacted me so much, dude. I told you about it years ago, I think. I see this, I don't know if it was when Viceland was actually fairly decent at the very beginning. You know what I'm saying? Because it was not what it is now.
Before they got super political.
Yeah. They used to do some good stuff. Like when they went to like North Korea.
That was my favorite.
That was the greatest thing ever. I think it was a Vice thing, like this is way long ago, where they like went to Cuba and they were like hungry.
Oh yes, I saw that.
Remember that?
Yep, mm-hmm.
They were hungry and they went in Cuba to like downtown. This is like city center. This is where Cuba should be booming, right? At least you would think the government would try to build stuff there to impress like visitors or something, but they didn't. So they were hungry, so they went to the place they could get something to eat. It was like this one shop, and all they had was a plain ham sandwich. That's the only thing on the menu was like a ham sandwich, and all the employees were just sitting around doing nothing, just hanging out, because they hadn't gotten their shipment from the government yet for their ham sandwiches, like and bread. Mm-hmm. And that was it. Mm-hmm. Because when the government gets in the restaurant industry, they're terrible at it. They can't do that right. And so
they had the grocery store too. Remember that?
The grocery store. What was in remind me of that? What was
they
that?
had to wait in line until it opened, and there was like just ridiculous amount of people in line. They had armed soldiers there.
Yes.
So as soon as it opened, it was like a mad rush, but it was like they showed like the shelves were like one row was like all the same tomato sauce. Yep. It was like, so they only had like a few things to choose from, but it was a mad rush. You were only limited in what you can get. And then remember the fuel, there was like on the highway, there was just like 300 cars in line on the highway trying to get off to get fuel, because there was only one place you could get gas, and there was only one price, and people were literally just waiting for hours just to get gas.
Yeah. And that's what you get. You get bread lines, you get gas lines, you get hospital lines when you don't live according to God's law. What's interesting too, and we'll move it over here in a moment here to some of the comments that President Biden said today on the thing. Let's go ahead and do that, because we're running out of time here. So I just see the time. Let's just go ahead and jump into this right now. This was this morning. This is President Biden talking about the current status with the something 19 and cookie mandate. I'm trying my very best not to use all the words that are going to get suppressed. And so I'll let President Biden speak here.
Today, I want to provide a brief update on my plan that announced in early September to accelerate the path out of this pandemic. It's working. We're making progress. Nationally, daily cases are down 47%. Hospitalizations are down 38% over the past 6 weeks. Over the past 2 weeks, most of the country has improved as well. Case rates are declining in 39 states, and hospital rates are declining in 38 states. We're down to 66 million, still unacceptably high number of unvaccinated people from almost 100 million in July.
So something to consider is that I think the number now, last time I checked, was at least 100 million American citizens have already had said 19. And have already recovered from it. And all the studies and all the data are demonstrating that the ability to fight any further infection from 19 is so robust and strong with those who have already had and recovered from, which would be us, baby. Yes, we took it down. We took it down.
I survived the 19.
It tried to get me, and I took it down. My whole family. Actually, your family didn't get it that you know of.
I think my oldest got mildly, but not my pregnant wife at the time and my other daughter. So
didn't get it?
No.
Yeah, and so my whole family got it and took it down, put that 19 in a chokehold. So when you think about, he's giving numbers here about so many Americans who still have not taken the cookie, the mandated cookie. But you have to take into consideration the fact that over 100 million people have already had and recovered from. And so, this doesn't get factored into the man's thinking somehow. And it hasn't been that way in the past. But listen, before 2019 and 20, it wasn't that way. When we thought about a particular sickness that you had already had and recovered from, you weren't expected to go ahead and like put it into your body, get a shot. And now we are. It's like, well, we still have 68 million or whatever people still haven't taken it. It's like, well, have you considered about how many of those people have already had it and gotten over it,
right?
And they don't see a need for it because their immune system, because they can read the data, the immune system is so robust and strong against anything future, even stronger than the vaccine itself. And that's even been said by people who are in the industry itself.
Right.
Just look at some of the stuff, the undercover videos that have been done out there. They show a lot.
Yeah,
a lot of things that I don't think people want you to hear. Anyway, so I want to just go on a little more and play some of Tucker in response to some of the stuff. I couldn't believe that Biden said this here.
That's important. It's important progress. But now's not the time to let up. We have a lot more to do. We're in a very critical period as we work to turn the corner on COVID-19. First, we have to do more to vaccinate the 66 million unvaccinated people in America. It's essential. The vaccine requirements that we started rolling out in the summer are working. They're working. The Labor Department is going to soon be issuing an emergency rule for companies with 100 or more employees to implement vaccination requirements among their workforce. Every day, we see more businesses implementing vaccination requirements, and the mounting data shows that they work. Businesses and organizations that are implementing requirements are seeing their vaccination rates rise.
Please tell me people can see through this, right? First thing is, it should surprise all of us that I think everybody over the last couple of months after he gave the press conference where he said 100 or more, everyone was under the assumption, this is a legitimate law or mandate.
Right.
Guess what? It wasn't. It was a press conference. Right. So today, as of today, what's the date today? The 14th?
Yep.
The 14th, today, he's talking about the Labor Department actually coming out with the rules where businesses have to do this. So in other words, it isn't a law yet. It isn't actually a rule yet. All he did was have a press conference. And this is what's so shocking to me, is you can have a president come out and give a press conference and say, here's what I want to do. And everybody follows lockstep.
Yeah.
Lockstep, as though he has the power as the king to give the decree.
He does not have that authority.
He doesn't have that authority. This isn't a monarchy.
This isn't Australia.
This is supposed to be a republic, and we actually have laws here. We have a constitution that says who creates law, and Congress creates law. The president is not allowed to just come out and just sort of willy-nilly say, "This, I'm going to do this. We're going to make this happen." I'm sorry. I think we left King George in the dust hundreds of years ago, and you're not supposed to be able to do that. And has everyone noticed that everyone just followed lockstep after a press conference? Nothing in terms of like law. This is law, and you must do this. So I find that so utterly fascinating that we're in a place as a nation now where we don't understand how the law works here and how we're supposed to operate as a country, where we believe things like that. But this is what I was saying. I hope everyone sees this. When you tell companies, look, this is going to be a mandate, 100 or more, and then all of a sudden those companies start firing employees who haven't taken the cookie, yeah, their vaccination numbers look like they're on the rise. When you threaten people, I'm going to threaten you with the death penalty. Take away a person's ability to feed themselves, and you've basically killed them. That's what Chappelle says, by the way. Taking away their livelihood is akin to killing them. I thought, and when I heard that, I was like, that's what I said, the death penalty. Take away someone's work, their ability to feed their families and themselves, that's basically like killing them. So when you tell somebody, hey, we're going to basically give you the death penalty if you don't take the cookie, yeah, the numbers might go up a bit. Also, if you fire people or they just quit and walk away as a result of this unconstitutional and ungodly and unlawful mandates, if you do that, then yeah, you look at the bucket you have left of employees, and sure enough, wow, lo and behold, we have mostly vaccinated employees. It's like because you threatened to kill these ones, and these ones just left. And so everyone you have left, lo and behold, they all have the cookie in them. It's like, please tell me that people can see through this kind of thinking.
more to well over 90%, the number of employees vaccinated. Let's be clear. Vaccination requirements should not be another issue that divides us.
Amen. Agreed.
On the one hand, exactly, it shouldn't be, and so that whole life, liberty, pursuit of happiness thing our country has. That's, by the way, those are biblical principles. That's from God. I'm not arguing just for the Constitution. I'm arguing for righteousness and justice. But it's you're making it that way. I mean, you're making that way. It like, for example, David just said. He lives in New York. He got the vaccine. Well, and moves on. Like, I have it. Yeah. And do we balk at that? Like, no. Okay. We believe in bodily autonomy. We're Christians. The Bible teaches that, personal bodily autonomy. And so, yeah, you want to take the cookie? You can take the cookie, but I shouldn't be forced to take the cookie, which is what's being offered here. Exactly right. Is that it shouldn't divide us. You should allow us to give everyone the cookie. Man, everyone should be mandated to have the cookie. Well, that's part of the problem, and it's not going to change because you're an old man that can't keep your thoughts together. And
are we so sure that they're not deep faking us with Biden? I really starting to feel like it's a weekend at Biden's, and he's just a big puppet and someone speaking for him. Yeah,
there's I think he has days where, I have to say, look, I'm a Christian, so I'm only going to believe something based upon evidence and facts and truth and witnesses and things like that. But I do have questions regarding, the year in the basement and incoherence and inability to form thoughts and those things. And then he got into a debate, the debate itself, and there was sort of a different person behind the podium that time. I don't know what kind of medications can do that, but they exist. Medications to,
some good uppers
give
out
you
there.
There's some good things, like, Adderall and other things to help you get laser focus.
A little cocaine.
About 3 hours. But he'll have days where you're like, he can't keep a thought together. How?
Or stay awake.
Why isn't somebody helping him? That's my question. Is like, why isn't somebody helping him? Because the family should be saying, hey, look, he's the president. He's got this position. But come on, guys. Like, he's not doing well today. He has days like that where you're like, he's not doing well today. Like, he's gone.
Yeah.
And in a moment like this, I mean, obviously someone wrote this up for him. He's reading off a teleprompter. But it's still not coherent, and nothing he's saying here is meaningful. But here's what I'm going to get to in terms of the lies.
That's why we continue to battle the misinformation that's out there. And companies and communities are stepping up as well to combat the misinformation. Southwest Airlines, at the head of the pilots union and its CEO, dismissed critics who claim vaccination mandates contributed to flight disruptions. School board members, religious leaders, and doctors across the country are fighting misinformation and educating people about the importance of vaccines.
It's incredible to me because seeing the response. This is what's gotten me over the last week. I know it's affected you too. I can't comprehend where we're at right now is that people can just lie to your face with a straight face and act so confident, so brazen with it. Like I don't hardly ever watch the news at all. But I saw a clip, I think it was from CNN. It just came across my feed. I watched about 30 seconds and I had to turn it off because it was making me physically ill. It was such propaganda and it was such a lie. It was lying about parents going to the school board meetings, and it was trying to turn them into like basically terrorists. And I thought to myself, people are watching this and they're actually buying it. And I thought that this morning too, when I watched this, I was leaving the house and I saw this, and so I played it. And I thought to myself, this is incredible that someone can just have, with a straight face, treat people like they're absolutely imbeciles. Like it's more than anything. I think it shows me how these people really view the peasants. Yeah, these people are too stupid to read. They're too stupid to listen. They're too stupid to understand. I can lie through my teeth as the president of the United States of America about a situation like this. Like companies are refuting misinformation, like Southwest. They refuted the misinformation about this had anything to do with people who are opposing the vaccine. And it's like, you really think you can get away with that? Like, do you think people are that stupid and foolish that they're going to buy this? And the truth is, I know maybe there's people today that are so blind they can listen to this and go, yeah, misinformation. It's like, why don't you ask the pilots? Yeah. Ask the employees of Southwest who have confirmed all of this. I mean, look at the picture of the Don't Tread on Me flag hanging out of the airplane.
Or the videos they've made.
I mean, it isn't interesting that Southwest, a week before the catastrophic moment they had where weather grounded them, but no other airlines, a week before they gave out to their employees a notice that, like, you have a certain time period. I think it might have even been a week or two or something like that. Probably. It was super short, where if you do not take the cookie, you're going to be fired. You're going to be terminated. And then after this weekend, after the weather,
which we didn't have here, and we're a major hub for Southwest.
After the weather problems across the United States of America that didn't affect the other airlines like that, all of a sudden they came out now with a more soft message to their employees saying, "Oh yeah, we don't want anyone to be fired from this, and just present your exemption. We don't want anybody to be fired from this." And it's like, oh really? So it had nothing to do with the had nothing to do with the people that called in sick, and grounded your entire airline over the weekend. So you go from you're going to be fired next week, or whenever it was, 2 weeks or whatever the time period was, if you don't take the cookie, to, we don't want anybody to be fired from this, guys, and just give us the exemption. We don't want anybody fired. It's like, misinformation, right? It had nothing to do with all the pilots and all the airline staff that just said, I'm use my sick days. You're firing me anyways, right? Because I won't take the cookie, so I'll use my sick days. It wasn't a staged strike in terms of like with their union or anything like that at all. It was these people who, many of them, and we're learning this as well, many of the airline pilots who fly us around all the time are ex-military. Yep. They're ex-fighters. And they swore an oath to that Constitution. And so that's who you have flying your airplanes. And these people didn't want to have anything to do with it. So,
well, that's why it's so important for people to actually stand up and quit just, being sheep. Because you look at immediately, just Southwest, for example, you have men and women that stood up and said, no, I'm not going to do this. And immediately people changed their mind. This is all about power and seeing how far the government can get people to comply. And if we'd stop complying, maybe they'll stop.
Just say no.
Stop acting like tyranny.
Yeah, you just say no. And in your collective industries, just say no. No, I'm not going to do it. And here's just a clip from I thought was important in terms of like Southwest corrected the misinformation. It's like, have you turned on any other news station? Have you read anything else to refute what you're saying to the country right now? Here's just a clip of Tucker interviewing one of the airline employees.
One of those good people is Joshua Yoder. He's a commercial airline pilot. He's co-founder of the group U.S. Freedom Flyers. He joins us tonight. Mr. Yoder, thanks so much for coming on. So, summarize for us, you pilots who have raised questions about these mandates have been, as noted, dismissed as criminals, terrorists. Tell us your motive in resisting this mandate.
Tucker, thanks for having me on.
Of course.
Yes, my motive for resisting it is primarily religious for myself. Basically, I saw, among my friends, I saw a need. Many of us don't want to take this. People were being coerced. I believe in freedom. And I'm here to support the freedom of my fellow employees and all people across this country. I'm not going to take a mandate. I'm not going to be coerced into doing something that I don't believe in.
So there are two levels in which to assess this. One is the level that you just described, the level that preserves American society as we've known it for 250 years with freedom at its core. Because if they can make airline pilots do this, they can make airline travelers do this, and they can. There's no end to what they can make you do. But describe, if you would, since you work in the business, what the effect on our national transportation infrastructure is about to be because of these mandates.
Well, as we know, the transportation sector is the heart and soul of this country, and it's a very delicate system. If there's a disruption in one part of the system, it has a catastrophic effect among the rest of the system, which is going to affect commerce, it's going to affect trade, and ultimately it's going to affect the economy. If you have flights reduced by 30% because 30% of pilots are fired because they won't take the vaccine, This is going to affect how your goods get here from overseas, how they're distributed to the stores. You know, the same thing's happening with the truckers. It's happening in the shipping industry. Those Amazon boxes that typically show up in 2 days, you might be looking at 3 weeks.
Have you felt that?
Not yet.
I have.
I haven't yet.
Weird. Like
I've heard people have.
Because it's interesting. So like, you know, Amazon Prime will have like sometimes same day,
right,
very next morning delivery, or you have Amazon Prime where you're getting it in a day or two for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I've had numerous instances over the last month where it'll tell me, because I'll buy a typical product like a supplement or something that it'll literally it'll be there by 5 p.m. I'll order it at 10, it's there by 5 p.m. or it's there by the next morning. I'll order it at midnight and it's literally there at 5 a.m. So that's just supplement. I'll go out of my supplement. I forgot it. I gotta get it. But now like it like 2 weeks ago, it was saying that the supplements, and I looked at a bunch of them, they were like 2 weeks out. I couldn't get them for 2 weeks.
I have seen some of that with some of the supplements, yeah.
And then even this week, I tried to order some stuff, and it told me that it was going to be here in the morning, and it still took like days to get here. Because this stuff is affected. There's a chain, right?
Yep.
There's a chain there. And he makes a great point. If 30%, that's what you and I have been seeing across the board, whether it's military or private industries, the numbers are consistent. 30% of people are saying no, and they're so strong in that conviction. They're like, fire me, I'm leaving, whatever. It's not happening. He's right. You lose 30%, it affects travel and commerce dramatically. But let's listen to some more.
So, I mean, it turns out that people with essential skills like airline mechanics, air traffic controllers, and yes, commercial airline pilots have more power maybe than they realized. You got to wonder, if people are being pushed to the point where they're going to be fired, how many more of these sick outs, job actions, strikes, whatever you're going to call what we saw this weekend, how many more of these do you think we're likely to see?
Well, first of all, we have all the control, and the control comes from a simple word, and that's no. We just don't need to comply. As far as I'm concerned, I will never promote a sick out or a work action. That is illegal. With U.S. Freedom Flyers, the organization that I'm with, we will never promote such a thing. With that being said, we also cannot control the actions of individuals. And I think that you will see massive disruptions in supply chain and in your travel if we just stand up and say no. If these companies fire us and they fire 30% of the workforce, aircraft are going to stop moving. And it's going to affect you. It's going to affect your air travel, and it's going to affect the economy.
So there you go. So misinformation, right? Here's a pilot talking about what's going on the inside. And this is just a small, there's just such a short clip. I figured that's a quick one to get across the point. There's plenty of them out there. There was a Southwest Airlines pilot on Cross Politic. Two days ago. And so, the outright bald-faced lies from the top to the peasants, nothing to see here, don't look behind the curtain sort of a thing. It's like these people truly believe that the peasants are idiots. They don't know. They don't understand. They think they're talking to people who are completely uneducated and don't do their own research, can't see for themselves, can't reason for themselves. I'll just tell you what to believe. And there is the thing we can end on today. Christian education used to historically always be about, and it still is today, classical Christian education, or people are homeschooling or Christian schools. Christian education is not just talking about like what is the case, right? But it's also the why. It's understanding how to think, not just what to think. And so, contrary to the opinion of many atheists, it's not merely indoctrination as to what to think. I would say that's actually how atheism goes. Christianity promotes the ability to think for yourselves, to reason through things and categories, and to think long thoughts. It's something I said to the guy that was he was a worker at the mill for the video we just dropped in Salt Lake.
Oh yeah,
he worked at the mill. I said it to him, and he could have taken it in an insulting way, but I meant it sincerely. Like, stop and look at what you're doing. I called him. I said, I know that you're part of the TikTok generation that can only think in like 10 seconds. And that's the problem. Is that I think social media does that. I think our devices are doing this to us, and we got to find ways to break free from the device's control of our mind, because it is a fact that it does manipulate the brain chemistry and all those things. But we've been reduced to a people that can only think in like 10-second sound bites, and we can't sit still for like long continued discussions that cause you to think and think in categories and make connections. You know, I mean, this is no tooting our own horn here, but like at Apologia Church, you know, we don't have a rule like for churches. I've been asked to speak at churches that give me a rule, like 25 minutes. You've got a 25-minute sermon. You can give 25 minutes and that's it. We don't go over 25 minutes. They can't handle that. And I've had amazing experiences where the people are completely shown to be wrong about that. But we don't have a rule of like 25-minute sermons. Like, you know, we say like preach a good sermon, a faithful sermon. It could be 40 minutes, could be 45 minutes. Sometimes it could be an hour. It's been known to be an hour and a half. But like a long time ago, you know, people were able to sit still for like a 3-hour message or talk from somebody and really think critically and think through it and really get something from it. We've gotten to the point where it's like soundbite. This is what you're supposed to think. No one's able to think critically and to think in a long string. And I think that's a real problem for us today is just that point, is that people have to be able to not be conspiracy theorists, but people need to be able to think for themselves and reason.
I think the prime example of this is Let's Go Brandon, which I am just a big fan of right now. Did you see that?
It was so funny when I saw it. I have to confess that I was like, I had to search through like, what is Let's Go Brandon? I was thinking initially what I thought was there was a guy named Brandon with Southwest that was leading the fight.
Did you see the original video?
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing.
But that's tell everyone about that.
So it was a car race, and the guy won, and his name was Brandon. And they're interviewing, I think it was CBS or something. This is a perfect example of what you're talking about. They think we're so stupid. So they're interviewing this guy, and if you listen, the crowd is clearly saying F Joe Biden. Like they're chanting that. And the chick interviewing him says, oh, look, they're saying Let's Go Brandon. And it's just a prime example of like, do you think we're that stupid that we really think they're saying Let's Go Brandon? So I'm a huge fan of Let's Go Brandon stuff right now. And like every meme I see, everything is just, it cracks me up. It makes my day. So, but that's a perfect example. That's what they think. It's a prime news channel, and you know, people are dumb. They're going to buy what we're saying here.
Right. And so I think it's important for us to obviously be prayerful. But you know what David points out, and we'll wrap the show up with this today. David Bahnsen, he points out, like, I made it a point to say, okay, what is going on, and then go beyond the what is happening in the economy and tell me like the description, like how did we get here, and then give me like a path forward, like what's going to take place. And I think that's where we need to get down to the bottom line of what creates a catastrophic situation in the economy or in shipping or in trade or in government. What's underneath that is ultimately in a broken, immoral people. That's what's wrong.
Yep.
Is that spiritually the people are broken. When you have a robust and faithful people community, they can create a robust and faithful government and private industry and economy because ultimately they know Jesus. And so, you know, one thing James was talking about this week is that oftentimes, even the professional talking heads you have right now that are considered the conservative leaders, you know, name one. Name a conservative talking head who is considered a leader in terms of a conservative cause, you know, that might have like here or there, you know, said, yeah, I have faith in Jesus. Yeah, I'm a Christian, sort of a thing. How many of them are actually talking about like the real thing, the real issue? I mean, there's a lot of complaints about like, this is wrong and it shouldn't be this way. And this is our history and here's where we've come from, that sort of thing. It's, oh yeah, okay. Those things are valuable. You can talk about those at times and they can be very meaningful. But like what's really wrong is that our nation doesn't know Christ, doesn't love God, doesn't love therefore one another, and doesn't have a transcendent law that they're standing on. Mm-hmm. Did you know that this thing right here, this talks about economics? Did you know that the issue of inflation is addressed in this book? Did you know that God has actually talked about how to create a government that operates in a way that's righteous and just? Did you know that, like, just that point, that economics are here? Righteous economics. Did you know, like, how to build a business, a successful business, is in this book? Do you know that? Do you know that the principles of like how to be a great scientist are in this book? The principles of how to be a great artist are in this book. And so like you can do all the playing around the edges that you want as a conservative talking head and say this is wrong and it shouldn't be this way and communism is bad and rah rah. All that. It's like, yeah, you're right, but like, okay, what's your answer as to how to fix it? Because you can't just tell somebody that loves someone else's stuff and wants to have it for themselves, communism is bad, that'll hurt people. Because in the end, they're really kind of like, they're out for themselves in the first place. Right. They're not convinced by your don't hurt somebody, ethic. Think about it. Like, you're trying to tell people, did you hear that San Francisco? Oh, what was the name of the store? I'm so sorry, I forget. It slips my mind. It was in San Francisco. Is it a Walgreens? I believe it was Walgreens in San Francisco. They had to shut down like 3 or 4 stores in San Francisco because they can't survive or keep up with all the theft that's taking place. People are just coming in and just stealing stuff, and they won't do anything to stop them. They can't stop them, and so they're shutting down the stores. They're like, we can't survive here.
Wow.
Well, so what I'm saying? Like you can, as a conservative talking head, you can tell all these people that are stealing things and hurting people, hey, communism is bad, you shouldn't do that, like you're going to harm people, you're going to destroy the world. It's like, well, what if they're Antifa and they want to set fire to the world in the first place? Like, what if that's their goal? What if they think in order to bring about the utopia, you have to burn everything down first? You have to create class conflict and burn everything down. So you can say like communism bad, socialism bad, but you're saying it to people who actually love each other's stuff.
Yep.
They want their stuff. They want it for themselves. And you know what? Honestly, they don't really, pardon here, in terms of like just being forceful and straightforward, they don't give a damn if they hurt their neighbor. They don't really care about it because they're out for themselves anyway. They love themselves more than they love their neighbor. So how do you transform that? Jesus. People have to have new hearts, new minds, new eyes to see. They have to actually love their neighbors. They have to think long term. They have to think about how does this affect my relationship with God and my neighbor. That's how you build a different world. And it only comes through Christ and through faith in Christ. You need to be saved. You need to have a new heart. That's Luke the Bear.
Did you do that, or is Isaac trying to shut you up?
I think he was trying to shut me up. He was like, you're done, Jeff.
Because your hands weren't on the computer, and all of a sudden the music went on.
No, it came in perfectly because I was ready to turn it on. I guess Isaac and I we're so in sync that he was like, he's done. He's done. He's wrapping up. So thank you, Isaac. You came in perfectly. That's
Good job,
Luke the
Isaac.
Bear.
Peace out, y'all.
I'm Jeff the Coleman Ninja. Go to apologiastudios.com. Get more. Sign up for all access. Partner with us in ministry. Go get your Bahnsen U account for free. Start learning. We're getting more up all the time. We want to remaster these before we put them up. We've got a ton ready to go. So go there. Get started. Thank you to David Bahnsen for entrusting us with your father's gifts. We want to do well with it, and we want it to bless the world. So go there and sign up today. We'll catch you next week right here on Apologia Radio. Presuppositional apologetics is what's the claim of presuppositional apologetics? Fundamentally, it's a revelational epistemology. So to follow the line here, it goes from sola scriptura, the principles that are there within sola scriptura that are just biblical principles in terms of God's revelation. That moves into apologetics and the philosophical claims about how do I know what I know? So how should I argue? Well, it's the voice of God. God's revelation is supreme. And that leads inevitably to the question of if you're dealing with issues of morality, if you're dealing with issues of justice and injustice, how shall I know? By what standard? And of course, I began to discover that in Bahnsen and of course in much of the Reformed tradition. But that's really what led me into a theonomic perspective of how do you know something is just or unjust? By what standard?